Well, today's a real treat. We have a broken generator in the garage. Now, this is an Army MEP 831A 3 kilowatt generator. It has a diesel engine. It can put out both 120 and 240 volts. I'm really excited to try to fix it up and get it working. I bought it at auction a week ago. I brought it inside the garage and let it dry out. And today we're gonna start attacking it and see if we can get it running. Here we go. Hi, I'm David, and I'm on a mission to take my house and garage off-grid. Now, part of that is to have a backup generator system because the sun doesn't always shine, especially here in the northeast of the United States. So having a backup generator is a very nice thing to have when you're trying to go off-grid. I don't think it's going to take a whole lot of work to get it going, but let's go through it together. I'm just going to show you what it is as it sits. Now, the only thing that I've done so far is I brought it inside the garage, which is heated, and I've let it dry out for a week. This gen set was manufactured in 2007. It's currently 2023, so we have a 16-year-old generator on our hands. But it only has 25 hours on it. So it hasn't been used a lot. Now, sometimes these have low hours because they've gone through what's called reset. I don't see a reset tag on this one. So I think those are original hours. And I also think it was a test unit. This gauge over here was not original. It's not on a normal setup, and I think they added that to measure oil pressure. We have a bunch of extra temperature sensors all over the unit. So in this case, this one was stuck in the exhaust and is partially melted. So this unit is not in that bad of shape. This pressure gauge is not original. And what's funny is that the oil pressure can actually exceed 100 PSI. So they should have had a larger one. We have a little bit of dent down here. It sat outside for a while because this emergency stop is usually red. We even have a couple of drain on the back. So we've got fuel, oil, drain. Back to the front, this is where we will hook up our 120 and 240 volt legs. If we open up the cover, we have access to the wiring. So we've got our speed control. We got a couple of relays. It's a nice little setup. I really like these units. Well, let's look down under the hood. We have here a single cylinder Yanmar diesel engine. The engine is an L70 model, about 6 horsepower continuous. This is where the fuel filter usually goes. This is the bowl that goes underneath it. They drain the fluids for auction. And over here, this is actually a permanent magnet alternator. So it's creating wild three-phase to go into this inverter. Yes, this is an old, original kind of inverter design. So if you've got a Honda or Predator inverter generator today, well, this is kind of the grandfather of them. This is a very old inverter. They don't look like that anymore, for sure. Typically, you'd have a battery that sits down here. This is a 24 volt model. All these orange wires, these are temperature sensors. They're not original. So that, I'll be pulling out all of these. So this is the positive post, and it looks like it's missing its cam lock. So that's why they've got the hose clamp there. So this type of thing is really cool. I used to use a lot of these when I was in. And these were some of the favorite ones for us because they were just easy to start. That single cylinder started easier than some of the other ones. But the little 24 volt battery was notorious for going flat on us. So it always needed to be jumped. At least in my unit. There's a tray in here, and this tray and cable, they would normally be used to secure an auxiliary fuel line. Now, I don't have an auxiliary fuel line for this. And it's kind of blocking me from getting down in there for some other things. So I'm going to take out the fuel filter base and this tray and cable, and that way I can get down in there where the fuel pump is and clean out better down in that area. The first thing I like to do in a situation like this is just clean it up. So I'm going to remove all these old temperature sensors and anything that's not needed. Then I'll get in here with a shop vac and get these cobwebs and kind of a little brush and kind of brush and vacuum it all out. Next thing I like to do is make sure that all the old fluid is out of the unit. So I'll tip it up with a block of wood under the backside and drain out the oil, and it does have just a tiny bit of old nasty oil in it. I also want to make sure the diesel tank is drained, so I'm actually going to add a little bit of gasoline into the diesel tank, slosh it around from side to side, and then I'll drain that out, make sure that there's no old diesel in there. This is the oil drain port. I just took off the dust cap from it, and these should be empty of any oil. That's the oil drain port, and I replaced that rubber hose, and it leads to this that 90-degree and the bulkhead fitting, and I'm draining out whatever little bit of oil was in there. Not very much, just a tiny bit with 25 hours on it. This is some break-in oil from John Deere, and it's 10W30. This is about to be my first start of this MEP 831A. I just put some fuel in. I have my 12 volt or 24 volt jump pack attached. There's no batteries. Batteries would usually sit in here. This is the positive clamp, which is on an insulated lug. That's how you're supposed to do it if you don't have the batteries installed inside. I have a brand new filter. This is the filter element, but the housing and the bowl were original to the unit, and I replaced all of the rubber lines. All these rubber lines are all brand new. It's gonna be the first start, so hopefully we do okay here. So we have our procedures written right here on the lid. I've got an outlet attached. We're just going to be trying 120 volts right now. This is a little switch that lets you switch between 120 and 240 right there. Right now it's on the 120 and 240 volt mode, which is fine. I just know that this is a 3 kilowatt system, and you don't want to try to put the full 3 kilowatts on one leg if you're in the 120 240 volt mode. Well, it's not starting, so we'll turn on the DC, turn this on, and we get a low oil pressure. Well, that shouldn't stop us from a battle short, okay? But we're not getting the fuel pump noise. The electric fuel pump down here should run, and we should hear it. It should be pretty audible, and it's not moving the fuel. And see, when we do that, we're not even trying to crank. Well, the pump is running. So what I've done inside here, I went through the TM, and it turned out we were missing these diodes up here. So I took those off of a parts machine. So put the diodes on off of a parts machine, and now that electric fuel pump is running. So we can actually hear the electric fuel pump, that's this one down here, and it's running, and I watched this fuel bowl fill up. We also hear the fan running on the inverter, and I can feel the air blowing. So there's a fan underneath it. Down under here there's a fan, this one. Okay, that's the other fuel pump right there. That's for an auxiliary tank. It's currently dry because it's not hooked up to anything, and that's why it's so darn loud. But you can add a fuel line here to an auxiliary tank, and it will fill itself. Right now it thinks that it's full. I only put 2 gallons in, so it shouldn't really be reading full. So that might need replacing. So let's see what we need to do here. Well, preheat on. Try to clear the fault. Oh, did not start. Okay, still have a failure to crank. It doesn't sound like it's trying. Well, it's still not cranking, but I noticed something else. We are dripping some diesel fuel. It looks like it's coming out of the right-hand one, unfortunately. Well, I'm working my way through on this generator. Now it does run, and it runs great when it's locked into the full throttle position, which would be this locked up. But I need it to do it automatically and keep it idle. So I adjusted this rod length yesterday. Now the instructions from Fairmont say to adjust this rod length until it's just before fully bottom. So that is full bottom right there. And so I'd say that's just before. They don't actually give me a dimension, but that's just before. So next, I'm gonna start it up, and then while it's running, I have to adjust the speed potentiometer, which is that little tiny screw down there. So I'm gonna get a little screwdriver and get ready for that part of it. Outside, we saw that this generator had a real problem with surging at idle. Under load, no problem at all, but at idle, it kept trying to shut off and then surge again. Now all that comes down to this governor controller. It controls the speed of the engine based on the load put on the engine. I'm fortunate enough that there's somebody who's a real expert on these machines who lives in the same state as I do, named Kurt. Now Kurt was kind enough to come on over here and take a look at this machine, and he diagnosed it as a bad governor controller. Now these governor controllers are notorious for going bad. That's pretty much the first thing that always goes bad on them. You're not gonna have the diesel engine fail, it's usually this. I purchased a replacement one from Kurt, so yes, he probably has a bias, but he had some very good reasons as to why this governor controller's not working and it's the fault. So, Kurt actually designed and has made his very own governor controller, and I'll leave a link to his eBay store where you can purchase these. And in the package comes with it a very detailed instruction. It's front and back, so it shouldn't take me too long. He includes a few labels, so we gotta label all these wires, take the wires off, unscrew it, screw the new one on, and we should be good to go. Now this old governor controller has 4 potentiometers down here at the bottom, which all need to be adjusted in a very specific order. Now I went through that process and I still couldn't get it to idle well. So that's one of the benefits of going to Kurt's system. Kurt has eliminated all the potentiometers. Now it does it all automatically, and he pre-programs these. So I can't wait to get the new one in and then try it out again. Hopefully we have no more surges. So we have the different labels going across, and they're going to correspond over here. As you can see down here, we have our 4 potentiometers, and then we've got our labels A through J. E has 2 on them, so we're going to label it twice for E. But all we got to do is label those. So here's our first one. I just cut it off, and that's A. All right, this will be our first test with the new governor controller. We're going to want to pay attention to this arm. Now the bottom of this arm has a magnet on it. That's supposed to be, I think it was 5/16 of an inch away from the magnet at idle. So when we first start it up, it should just sit there with no load at 5/16 of an inch off. So we're gonna check for that. Hopefully everything works. All right, we got our battery on. Doing it! So here are the instructions from Curt. It says right there, 5/16. Let's check it out together. All right, right now we have no load on it. I plugged in the charge inverter. Now we're gonna add the charge inverter. Sounds great. All right, so right now we have 50 amps going in, about 2,800 watts. I'm gonna take off the load. And hear that? It just idled right down. It did exactly what its job is. All right. That worked perfect. Awesome. Curt, thank you so much for designing a governor controller that works this well. Thank you. That just worked beautifully, and I didn't have to fiddle with anything. In a future video, I hope to set up an auxiliary fuel tank so that I can do a proper fuel economy test and measure the kilowatt hours that we can put into the battery bank for gallon of diesel that we consume. Right now, I can't do that easily because with diesels, we have a supply and a return line, and I can't run the diesel empty. Thank you everybody so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.